With that, Brian, did you want to give a quick overview? Because I know you had.
Yeah, I just
Sorry to jump the gun on a couple of things.
no, that's fine. That's I thought that what we look forward to as a board just having a chance to kind of talk about what they think, So I just wanted to give some background information. These are the vote results that have been published. They were put out by Ben Dickey to our school community, and the media have picked it up. Basically, what we see is that the general fund budget was defeated by about 1,000 votes. The Center for Technology was successful in almost the exact opposite by 1,000 votes. And then the fund balance allocation was favorable about 72%. Yeah.
Sorry, can you duplicate that tab or something and then put it over Andre?
Sorry, Andre. I can't control Google.
You're not controlling that either.
I'm seeing the presentation. Thank you.
Well, can we just like have Andre on the computer and then can you project to that?
I'm on the Google Meets, so that it was important.
When you present, that's just
Important to have Andre in, so that we're using this technology rather than technology just with.
Can you put it in slideshow mode? Yeah.
I just was there.
Actually, sorry.
I believe this is. I'm not sure if the board wants to have a conversation about the results that you've already seen.
I'm curious why the CTE vote is so close. Because for what reason would anybody vote down?
I have a same thought.
It's
Yes.
it doesn't impact
Yes.
taxes
Yeah.
at all.
You'd be surprised when people don't understand. Bottom line, we have conversations with the community. There are a lot of people who think that stand on the line, that people will throw in the CTE budget and say, oh my God, my taxes are going up because of this too. So you understand, we understand.
That indicates that a lot of people probably know what's happening.
Yes.
But
So that, I guess, there's something to look at. So the only item that will be re-voted on is the general fund budget. So some of this data does show us at the very least that there was a more significant percentage for the carryover as well as the CTE budget, both voting yes, so that there's individuals out there that do support the budgets, but were unable to support the school budget, general fund in itself. In terms of the authority, EWSD to appoint clerk treasurer, again, that was a separate issue that doesn't necessarily have correlation to the general budget, but I think at the very least this just shows us as a board that it wasn't no across the board, it was no specifically to the general fund budget that we proposed to the public, which now we need to dig into and take a look at. But is there any other comments or conversation around the budget vote? Yeah, we'll jump into the next piece here.
So this is just over time, just to sort of see where the results have been in the past. We can discuss this. And then the exit poll. So we were intrigued by the town of Essex that performed in a very basic exit poll when they had their town meeting vote. And we proposed the idea, Natasha, that was pretty good, but proposed the idea to the board. We wanted to keep it really simple. I know it's overly simple. There's no science to it, whatsoever. It's a nice step forward. I think that we've proven that it's worth investing in a little bit more. But what you've received so far, and probably more than this, is 562 responses. They're breaking down pretty close to what the overall vote for and against was. And then what we have is in blue for those that voted yes. We were asked them to select just one of their top elements. There's also no way that we can tell if people did this once or twice or 20 times. So those that wanted to choose more than one figured out they could do it more than once. But we have at 11 or 12%, I always vote yes and trust in the budget process. This is out of 247 responses. 30% said I support teachers. 8.5% said, I believe in Essex Westford School District spending priorities and programs. 18 responded that their top reason for voting yes was EWSD did its best to constrain costs while meeting student needs. And the largest reason for those voting yes was investing in education is important to me, regardless of increase. For those responding no, we will start with blue from the top to the bottom. The blue is rising taxes and affordability concerns, garnered the largest of 47.3%. Statewide funding issues was a small portion. I'd imagine that that's somewhere sub 5. 16% disagreed with the spending priorities. Staffing cuts were included. That would be somewhere in that same realm, sub 5. 19% non-instructional costs too high. And 9.6% responded that they voted no for the budget because more reductions were needed.
So again, with this poll, part of the goal was to have something very short and concise so that people would take it and have time to quickly do it as they were walking out to get a pulse. Is this a scientific poll that tells us exactly the intricate details of budget? No, but it gives us some general themes that then now we can kind of dig a little bit deeper into. So to me, the biggest glaring part was the 47.3%, the raising taxes and affordability concerns of why individuals voted no out of 313. That was a huge chunk within there. Looking up at the individual responses of why individuals voted yes, I support teachers along with investing in education is important to me regardless of income. So now as a board, we don't exactly know the specific areas within that 47.3% along with the 16 and 18% that individuals were referring to, but we can now start digging into those areas. And I would say at our next vote, we would also again do an exit poll to have individuals be able to give a quick pulse on the results that help just continue to inform that budgeting process. It's a best practice that's out there.
How was this created? Like, how are those items chosen?
They're just, we came up with a draft, shared it with the executive committee. It is like super elementary.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort.
So we can.
Because being a science person, I just caution using this to drive our conversation too much because it's not scientific.
And we saw that there was probably 50 responses until Robert's email was sent out by Ben. So we also have to look at, like, there was little generated interest in completing the survey on sort of the day and actions of it. But upon the failure, I think your community said, well, we want to tell you what we think. So this was an opportunity that we don't normally have.
And I think at one point, I agree with not taking this and having it define our every action from here on out. But I know one of the things that we had an in-depth conversation about as a board is what was the most important thing to the community. And I think one thing that we really clearly see is just the raising taxes and affordability. That's a driving factor, which to me is at least an indicator that we need to look at how are we reducing that percentage increase, that is a driving force over and on top of other issues.
Agreed. I also brought down for that information that 50 took it before and then a lot more took it after. So that says community engagement is there and we could possibly get more science around the drivers.
No, Brian, I appreciate it. I think it's a great first start, especially since we've never done it before. And I don't know, maybe the districts have done it before, but I think at least for a first look, we can definitely just put a second forward and then we can continue to like refine this as we go forward, getting more data from folks in the future. But I do appreciate it a lot. Yeah.
Did the mailer go out? Or like explain it?
Yes,
I did just want to say, as you have your conversation, that your legislature's been busy. They've been working on educational funding and educational cost containments. This week, there has appeared to be probably one of the most significant in history imaginations of a new funding model for education in the state of Vermont. And it has, right now, it lives inside the yield bill, which is a bill that has to be passed before the budget. It's usually the second to last bill that passes. It is typically, sometimes it can be a single page and have 4 items in it. It right now has about 40 pages and imagines quite a bit. So that's happening. It's meeting with a lot of some testimony and some concerns. I also want to say that the homestead yield is improving. It should be updated by the JFO next week to give us another number. That number really reflects overall spending in the entire state and then impacts us. Because again, we are participating in a statewide ed fund. We are not funding our own education locally. So our spending, along with all the other spending in the state, ends up generating it. That spending has ballooned up to about $240 million of increase. It has come down to about $190 million at this point in time as budgets have been revoted and gone through. That's driving the yield up. The yield has, even in small amounts, the yield has some material differences or material improvements to our overall tax rate and tax impact. So the yield is something that we want to be watching carefully. And then finally, or two more, is that there is a one-time income sensitivity credit that's being factored in right now in the raise and median yield bill. We're trying to get some more information about what that looks like and how it does. But I think it's about $19 million that they're setting aside.
It's moved, depending on the scenario, anywhere from 19 to 24.
Which would be focused at the income sensitivity, which about 70% of Vermonters pay based on their income or some factor of their income. So that has been a high priority for the legislature to try to do. But as they give that credit, actually it lowers the yield because that money is going to come out of, or it doesn't come into.
And right, I'm probably broken records accuracy all the time, but again, for our community, that's 60% for our community it has income sensitivity, correct?
Yeah. And income sensitivity can really vary, but the one that we know is like in the most simple terms, somebody who has an income of $80,000 on a fixed income, lives in a house that's valued between $225,000 and $400,000 is going to pay squarely and solely on their income and not on their property value or property taxes. Thank you. Then as you go up and as your house goes up, and it's your appraised value, not your CLA value. I honestly wish many of these things were much less complicated because I barely understand myself when I explain these things. And I've been doing this for enough years that I do understand it, but each one of these has so many nuances to what the actual impact is. And then finally, the town of Essex appealed its equalization study for its common level of appraisal, and they are that we may see the common level of appraisal improve. It may be less of an impact by like a couple of percentage points. So that's new information. Didn't know there was that process, but we learned about it, and so
Do we know the timeline of when, like, would we know that before we're warning the budget, or when we warn them, like, I don't know how long?
I think
that
we'll have
is.
an indication.
Okay,
It depends on whether they choose to sign off on the first proposal that has come back. If they don't sign off on that, then it has to go through a hearing process.
so that could have a potential impact on the overall tax increase for Essex Town at the very least.
After CLA.
After, yeah.
But just the count.
Just in time. And, the municipality very well could be in the appeal process. We weren't sure that they sent us a notice, and that's how we learned about it. So there may be some, maybe worth. I think that's it. I just wanted to bring us back to like, this is where we were, net ed spending, what we were talking about, 17.5% to 23% increases after CLA, where we are with tax rates. this is the position of where we are since merger. And this is before the valuation of our homes. So this would be the tax rate if our homes just were always at fair market value, which they are not. It's been some time. So pre-merger, the tax rate was $1.55, and that was across all our communities. This is the tax rate for, that is unaffected by grand list and CLA. So it was $1.55. When we merged, we had a merger incentive. So we started with 10 cents, went down 2 cents every year. So there was some savings, and there was some cost savings by eliminating a superintendent, a business manager, legal services. A number of administrative positions were eliminated because they were duplicative. So in that, we were able to immediately have a tax rate that was about 5 cents less. The next year, again, with some help with the merger incentive, we had a tax rate that was about 3 cents less. The next year, we had a tax rate that was about 2 cents less. In FY21, as we began recovery from COVID, the tax rate went up approximately 4 cents. The next year, the tax rate went down 1 cent. The next year, it went down 11 cents. The next year, it went down 6 cents. This year, before CLA, it's scheduled to go up 8 cents. That is the result of our budget without factoring in the soaring increases in people's home values inside of our communities.
So again, we're not here. Our current budget rate is basically, it's higher than last year in 2023, but still lower than 2022 and years back, just the rate.
But because of home values in the area, it drives it up.
Well,
So-
because of the calculations of
Of how it-
F-127.
Correct.
So if we were back in municipal, we weren't doing a statewide tax, which requires an equalization study to bring everyone up to some fair market value.
Right.
Then this is what we would be seeing versus your appraised value.
Sorry.
One thing I'd like to add at this time, though, is that 5 years ago, the income threshold was higher than it is now. The income threshold has dropped for people qualifying for prebates. And yet, we do have knowledge that incomes are increasing in certain categories. So I just thought I wanted to say that.
So with that as a board now, or Brian, if you want to go to the next slide, or actually, could you go back to the overall budgeting amount?
This one?
Yeah, so with this one right here, just for community awareness too. So right now, that was the budget that just failed. However, looking at those percentage rates, those have already changed and will be changing based upon the new calculations for the yield and the CLA appeal potentially. So I would just say as a board, it would be helpful for us to know at our next meeting on Tuesday, maybe a revised yield number. So that as we're calculating out how much percent we want to take down off the budget for that tax impact, we kind of have a better idea of how the current yield is impacting that. If we have it. Yeah, I do know. Yeah, that's what because I know that was the rumor mill that was coming on Monday. So I was hoping that by Tuesday we might, if possible. So this way, as a board, as we're thinking about how much money we're taking off, we actually have a better calculation to tell taxpayers of your taxes would go up by X percent, rather than basing it off this previous federal number, which is outdated, and we wouldn't have an accurate number for them.
If I may say, I'm looking at our agenda, and I really think that what we wanted to do tonight was to try to give administration some
Agreed.
stuff. We're talking about timing. Unfortunately, I'm super frustrated with the state is continuing to monkey around with these calculations, and it continues to leave us in limbo. So I feel like we just have to start giving some guidance, and then we're going to have to, I guess, throw the state's numbers in whenever they decide they come up with something.
I agree.
So-
I just wanted to get the
No,
context
I
first, so
appreciate
we
that.
have
I just think that I'm just looking at the time, and I know that people are here, so.
And just to point to, if we're going to have an extra meeting next week, is discuss, we'll actually have more opportunities to see it next week. So
So right now, it's,
agree. No, you're right. You're
I
right.
agree. That's
but I appreciate obviously the updates very much.
so back to Brian in terms of the next piece there.
So I think that, I just want to point out, this wasn't the budget that was on the warning, right? That's another super confusing thing.
Yeah.
So the budget on the warning was our gross expenditure, and we asked for an authorization by the voters for a spending authority. So we don't ask for a line item, it's not a municipal budget, it's a spending authority. So, and then the part of our budget that generates our tax rate, the part that we're basically need to generate so that we can run and the state fund will help us pay for, is our net ed spending. And so this was the net ed spending. The board in December and then again in January and again in February continued to use net ed spending as its sort of guide. But I think that it may choose to use a different guide at this point in time, but I just want to kind of throw us back to like, this is where we've been. And the board had discussed using tonight as some freewheeling, like we'd like to know more about this, we'd like to do that, with the idea on Tuesday, you would give, to the degree you can, clear guidance for all of us to know about what's our target.
And things you want us to bring that cost up. So if we talk big items, we bring on Tuesday those costs.
So what we'll do at this point, I know board members have sent feedback around different costs and different ways to reduce. I know that there are different ideas that have been floated around. I think what would be helpful at the very least is we know we have to take a certain amount of money off of the budget. And then what we have to think about is what buckets do we use to fill that overall reduction? And we have to look at buckets in multiple different areas to basically equate to that total amount we want removed from the budget. So tonight, I don't think we're getting to the point of saying how much we want off the budget. I think what we need to do is say, what are some areas that we would like administration to take a look at that could be reduced? And how much money would that allow in terms of reduction? And that's what they would bring back to us on Tuesday. So we have a better idea of if we're saying, hey, reducing this area, how much of an impact does that actually have on the overall amount?
Let's go. It's 8 o'clock. Let's start talking about those.
So with that, I will go around. I know there was different themes that were brought forward. So
Well, you received,
Yep.
you asked for and received, I think, some collective feedback. Can you share that with us?
Yep, so within there, some areas that were presented were extracurricular activities. There was cost savings in terms of school buildings in themselves, such as Westford. Sports in itself, in terms of reduction, not necessarily cutting all sports, but again, I want to be really clear to the community as I'm reading these. This is not saying that we are cutting any of these things. This is saying we need to just have all options on the table so that we as a board can actually understand to the fullest what amount are we able to cut back and what's the impact within these different areas, because that's what we need to do as a board at this point. Busing in itself, broken down by different areas so that we could see if we were to make a reduction in busing, what kind of impact would that have? Administration in itself, just more of a breakdown of costs, taking a look at either administrative cuts and or administrative freezes, or rather than cutting overall positions, there was the idea of pay cuts instead within that non-direct support service staff. The other one, Westford again, asking what programs are the highest costs that could potentially have some reduction areas. What programs are staff saying that they're seeing as of little value, and could we reevaluate those in terms of scaling those back? Again, based on community voice, reduction of non-direct support service staff. So looking at maintaining as many direct support service as possible. Consolidation again. And then looking at areas that are not necessarily directly related to direct instruction. So one of the ideas was a lot of ideas around fundraising have now been put into the budget in itself. So taking a look at where could potential items such as sports that maybe are within the budget go back to self-funding through fundraising, or other areas of fundraising that have been brought into the budget, to be able to take a look at those items so that we could move that back to a fundraising model rather than directly within the budget. Again, these are things that are out there. So, and I want to be transparent because I want the community to know what we're thinking, and we have that authority to do that. Looking at specific specialized classes that have extremely low attendance. The other aspect, again, this person wrote administration or just non-direct support service. Looking at number of principals. Again, Westford was brought up again. Administration brought up again. Busing brought up again. Reduction of principals. Looking at payroll in itself, just in terms of freezing. And then the other piece that was brought in here is just looking at specific things that are being mandated. And are we able to, I guess, push back a little bit was one question. And then the other item in here was around facilities. Is it possible to hold back on, I know there's facilities improvements that need to be done, but is there a possibility to hold off on certain facilities improvements, or are all the ones in there absolutely necessary to the point where we wouldn't be able to hold classes, which I know we asked that as a board, but maybe just digging in for more clarification on that. Specific areas where the board did mention that they feel are priorities to maintain within the budget. Continuing to deliver specific programs, to deliver a sound education, honors and AP programs, maintaining those. Restorative justice, arts, fine arts, math, English, science, computer science, languages, social studies. Maintaining SEL supports, reading and fine arts. A high desire to maintain positions that provide direct instruction to students, essential support services, paraprofessionals, and areas and positions with high usage and participation needs like mental health supports.
Is that something that can be shared to others?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, yes, no, I'm sorry.
Go really fast.
Yeah, like, this went out one question to collect all this, so yeah, I will send all this away. So,
Isn't this the board?
yes, okay, yep.
Welcome to share. Me too.
Yeah.
Yep. And then
For
again,
the
this was,
students.
this was just shared out
responses.
today. This was very quickly, like, to the elected board members as soon as the budget failed, just to get a quick pulse, but I will give it to you guys and then get it over to you, because not all board members have replied either. And then from there, there's other comments in here just around like more clear community engagement, more clarity on helping misunderstanding from the community around the impacts of state legislation, but then what do we actually have control over? And making it extremely clear to the community what we're cutting, why, and being able to present that really clearly. So with that, these were the buckets that, again, not all board members replied, but at this time, I'd be happy to put more out there and we can take note of them. But any thoughts or comments as we're here?
Yeah, I know when we were talking about the maintenance budget, it was around 1.7 million, and I know that I was questioning the stormwater projects that are about 200,000. So I would like to bring up anything that the state is telling us to do that they are themselves not funding. I want to kick down the road until they are more forthcoming.
One thing I'd like to explore, and I'm not trying to stave off comments on Westford or whatnot, but if I'm not mistaken, Summit School is the oldest building in the district. And the question I have to raise, is there a possibility of consolidating some of the grades or into Hiawatha or the other Junction Elementary School in order to lessen the cost of maintaining Summit? And I'm not sure if there's a room, if that's tolerable or not, but it's just a question as I keep looking at thinking what's going to happen when we resume the PCB testing, et cetera. And the other comment is, given that we meet again on the 16th and the 15th is significant, will there be information regarding I hate to ask, but what potentially could be taken, what action could be taken before the 15th?
April, Andre?
What's that?
What action on what, Andre?
Well, the 15th of April is when
Oh, yes.
certified staff have to receive notification or non-notification. The deadline is the 15th.
Andre, yeah, Andre, we took this last week in executive session.
So,
So,
Okay,
just
very good.
just to try to stay on what you were saying with, so just trying to, I guess I'm just trying to listen to what was coming out of the feedback that you got from us.
Yep.
Was it sounded like there were certain things, because I think we're trying to give them
correct.
something that they can come back. So it sounded like, the question about Westford came up a few times, so that's something that I guess we're looking for. And then,
Just, and as you've heard the comments, what's it mean to you?
I mean, you have them in front of you, but it's,
Correct. Yeah, it
were
is-
people saying closure of Westford? Is that
Yes.
what people were saying, closing Westford?
Like July 1.
There's no comment in there in terms of when,
Time.
but yeah.
Okay, I just.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that does.
What
impact, yeah.
What the idea would be, I think, the idea would be, yes, we're talking about something politically very sensitive, yes, but there's a cost to running a building. We know that the discussion in the state is fewer and fewer. This might be a hand that's dealt with us sooner rather than later. There is a cost to run the school, so maybe if you can determine what that cost would be to move those 168 students to Essex schools.
Actually, again, I want
And I'm not saying that would be favorable to the board or the public, but if we are looking at what things cost, I think it would be fair to look at the cost of certain schools.
Yeah.
And then I guess Andre is then asking
Another
that
school,
question
Right.
about consolidation
With
of,
others, yeah.
in conjunction.
I believe what he's trying to say is maybe taking Fleming and moving them into Hiawatha and Summit, or moving either Summit or Hiawatha into the other one. I'm not sure,
But I think it's the same
K
thing
through
of what is a
5, yeah.
building cost.
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
consolidate K through 5.
Okay, and I can give you the cost. I'm not sure if we would be able to dispose of the building on July 1 and not continue to carry the cost.
like a year.
Like, so we would have to find a buy, we'd have to go through it. There's
Right.
actually a process that requires some engagement with the community that would be impacted. So there's a few things, but we can look into it as a thought exercise.
we also look into lessening Westford rather than complete closure, but going at a pre-K through 6 and seeing what the 7, 8, because I know the grade levels are not bulging at the walls anymore, is when I first got on. So that's another question out there, but I think we need to look at all the buildings in the district to see where the capacity can be shifted to in order to lessen.
So I think, like, taking a step back here, I think this is kind of our goal and outcome. Is that we're asking administration to bring us back numbers for multiple different.
Pause the committee. I know there's a conversation out there, but we're trying to have a conversation here, so I would appreciate if you have a conversation, you want to take it outside, so that we can do the work here, just so common courtesy, I appreciate it. I apologize for sharing this. Go ahead.
So in terms of what we want to do is we want to identify some areas that the board or that the administration can bring back to us with numbers. And in thinking through community engagement next steps, we need to then approach the community of saying, okay, community, here, I'll just be really honest, there's not going to be like options where we're like, wow, we really want to cut this. Like, no one wants to be excited about cutting anything or reducing anything. But what we need to do is we need to do serious community engagement to understand what is the community saying about these different options, to better understand what is palatable to the community when it comes to reductions. So that's kind of the step process that we want to move through when we're thinking community engagement. And now the community might come and give and approach with other ideas as well, but what we want to do is we want to try to come up with a finite list of here are different options that allow us as a board to reduce the budget by X amount, which we will determine at our next meeting in order to cut these specific areas. So that's kind of the step process that we want to go through, especially in the next week when we think of engagement. So the goal for what we want to give Brian and Beth and Heather is what are these specific areas? So to Brian's point there, when we say reduce an area or cut an area, we want to be really specific. So like with the building, for instance, we need to be specific. So Brian, like, please like ask us those deeper questions. Like as we're saying, like take a look at a reduction in an area, like make sure you have the specifics of what you need to be able to bring back a number that makes sense, or that it's even able to be done in this fiscal year.
Yeah, that's what I would want to know is because consolidation has been brought up several times. Is it even possible to consolidate? What is the impact of consolidating? Do we have the space to consolidate? All of those things. So it's, to me, it's not just about cost, it's about impact. And if it's not feasible and it's not possible, then we have to take it off the table and move over, like move on to something else. So,
And the, some of the consolidation savings would be in your building utilities and so forth, if you could do that. Some of it may also be in your staffing.
Right.
But Monday's the deadline, so you have no options to impact that staffing on an idea that you'll be considering in 3 weeks. That's the deadline. That's why everything needed to be proceeded with that. So, but we can take a look at it. I mean, Andre's, what would be the concept of a pre-K? I also want to say that it's indicated by the activity happening at the State House is this may be our easiest budget going forward.
Yeah.
The state is at an inflection point where it can't afford where the costs are going. That they were increasing at 11.5%, 12%, and at one point in time almost 14%. And it's just, we felt it, our own community, that we had supporters their entire lives vote for school budgets. Never even read a ballot that needed to really consider a 23% increase. So as we go in and they start talking about cost containment, they start talking about foundation formulas and so forth. These are just completely different than anything we've ever had. And there's really an interest to try to create almost this process in which people are rejecting school budgets because they've penalized the approval of them. It goes back to some of the stuff that was in the process with excess spending. So I just say that because some of these things may not be executable in 5 months.
Right.
But they may begin a conversation that is something that can happen in 3 years or 5 years or a year. So I think they're good to bring up.
Well, the thinking around facilities and money that you get as a district is consolidating to build new. So that would be a conversation at that time.
One additional comment I'd like to make is
Or
any.
one second. Go ahead.
But our conversation now, back to what Andre was saying before, we need to figure out, if I'm understanding this correctly, please bear with me, I'm brand new, even though you've seen me over there before. We need to figure out like people, right? Like Monday is the deadline so we need to start talking about how that impacts people. Is that correct?
Yes, for RIF notices according to the contract. This board has already done that because we had to do that by Monday. So those conversations have been had. We had them as board,
Okay,
which was executive session because this contract.
okay, that's where I was.
So you would have access
Today's my first day.
at this point.
You can always say that. We say that.
No, you can always.
At this point, your flexibility would become your support staff, your unionized support staff, your non-union staff. And you could exercise, and we're trying to exercise a great deal with any kind of resignations and any kind of vacancies. And we're trying to delay to the greatest extent possible, extending any contracts, because once that flexibility is gone, it's gone. So we have begun the process of notifying people that there's a reduction in force. So that was again their contractual notice. They will be afforded, many of them will be afforded a recall, and they have been done in a point of not knowing what a final voter approved budget will look like. So we're hoping, in an ideal world, we're hoping that we don't touch any of them. And in the worst case, that we touch only the absolute maximum. But this is the last opportunity that you would have to impact about 450 of your employees. Otherwise, any change would be on the backs of those other employees. And I just say that in a way of trying to understand trade-offs, flexibility, choices, and so forth.
So one thing just to clarify for the community too, like a RIF in itself does not mean that someone has been terminated. So I want to make that really clear that as we work through this budget and get an approved budget, that people are recalled. So, and in previous years, there used to be RIFs because of when the budget vote was, is in terms of timing. So a RIF is not a termination. So I want to make that clear, not only to the public, but also to teachers as well. So
it is a massive amount of uncertainty and anxiety, and can be crushing to have to proceed. It is not, we have not needed to do them. We fortunately have negotiated our RIF deadline to be after our budget vote, which was wonderful because before it was beforehand.
Right.
And so we haven't needed to do that process, and we've benefited from great support and improved budgets and really haven't gone through it. Unfortunately, we're at that point where we needed to try to find some level of security in case. And that in case happened with a failed budget on Tuesday.
Understood.
So now circling back to the different buckets that we want to dig into in terms of the costs. So Westford, we brought up as an option, but we've already started that is going to be something that like this year. The other items that were brought up in here were extracurriculars, fundraising, switching that around along with athletics was another option in here. I just want to put something out there. This is a general question to administration. If we're looking at cuts, it's often very hard to hear one specific area taking a huge hit. Maybe coming back with an idea of like, what if we did across the board cut of a certain percent, like within different programmatic areas, so that yes, it's a bit of an out, but it's an out spread across rather than one specific area having a huge or just being completely taken out. And again, like this will have to come from the board, but I want to put that out because I've seen that and that's been done before too, so that it's a spread out rather than a specific area.
What we've heard from one public member, and I agree, this is also the time where we categorize into three, the must-haves. Right. And if we have something that's a must-have, which is a nice-to-have, it's hard to see where taking some from all makes. But I mean, there's no way everyone's going to be pleased by what we decide here. I guess if that is something they can present to us, fine. I think that's tougher to do than holding something dear and not touching it.
And just to be clear, so you're not looking for some kind of target for us tonight, for the next week. Okay.
Yeah.
Like
Okay,
a
right now,
money
it's
target, just a money target.
Yeah, or just
Yeah,
something for them to.
Okay.
So what they'll do is they'll bring back these different buckets that will have a certain amount, and then will give us an idea of like, all right, if we did all of this, what would be our largest reduction? And then we'll have a discussion of the new yield, hopefully, is knowing, okay, what's the actual tax impact on the community? So that we can see, by cutting this much out, weigh the cost benefit analysis of how much this actually affects people's tax.
Perhaps would the board like to have, like we've done some of the times before, where it's like a couple of scenarios that are up on the screen that have some time.
Yep. Okay. And then I think the other part of it is just like a slide where there's just naming different areas and what, in terms of cost containment, like what are some things we can look back. So looking at, I would say like, if you can bring forward areas to us that received an increase, like different areas. I know we have the one line item budget that gives different programs and pieces through there that showed increases for this year, but taking a look at where some cost containment that we could scale back, or it would still have a functioning program, but be able to scale. I think our goal is to try to do little harm, but also we do have to look at bringing up enough money to be able to drop off the budget. So again, going back to other areas, and I will send this on to them so they can bring a laundry list of different options. But other areas, this was the board.
So this is me being, kind of out of the box thinking. So we are at district about 3,300 to 3,600 students. I imagine Aaron's work when equity and inclusion could be just
Yeah.
1,000. So here we are, one school district amongst many. And I think we have payroll, we have HR, we have director of education. We have these roles that aren't cheap. They wouldn't be cheap if we had 1,000 kids, and I think they would be just as effective if we had 6,000. What I'm getting to is, would it be possible to talk to MMU or other districts and say, hey, what if we ran your payroll for you? Took on, we're 900 people, took on their 600 staff, ran payroll for them. I imagine the slight increase in staff would more than make up for the cost of consolidating some district functions. I don't know if you, Beth, for example, have talked with other districts. I think there's opportunity in coalescing some of the things that we do from a leadership standpoint for more than just our kids to 3 times as many as our kids.
We've definitely had conversations among the Champlain Valley superintendents in what to share, and moving forward, especially around programming for students. We have also talked at one time about transportation. Is there something that we can do around that to share the cost? We have not talked about finance in that sense.
Yeah, and I would have to talk more about it. I have actually quite a bit of experience in doing that. It's really hard when you have, like, payroll sounds easy. You have different benefit packages. You have different master agreements. A lot of meetings. Even there's a bill right now going through the House that's called the BOCES bill, which is intended to provide a mechanism to do some of this. And as you read it, it's added cost structure, added board, added administration.
It's fair. I know it's not something that's easily addressed tonight. We've got 92 districts in the state for 80,000 kids.
Yeah.
It just seems like there are so many opportunities to consolidate central office tasks.
Yeah, I think if you want to be able to do that, it's merging.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, we have supervisory unions that kind of function in that way, and I can tell you from my colleagues who have to operate and go to 7 board meetings with 7, districts, it's not cost effective. In fact, business managers are talking about how could we do away with that part.
I would love to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
I believe there's opportunity. So I said my point.
The other thing, just in terms of outside of the box and just looking at our district, and I know this was going to be a conversation around facilities, but I know we're talking about cutting, but also, is there any out of the box outside revenue? Like when we think the ice rink, or when we're thinking just in general, are there other ways to bring in revenue to the district, like especially from a nonprofit background? Are there other, again, like if that's something that then offsets our overall budget? And again, not spending too much time on that, but is there an option for that? So again, going back to cuts, so going back to areas of reduction, anything else from individual board members? Again, the list that I read before, those items will be brought back to the board, but in addition to that, any other areas?
I just want to be clear that what's going to happen, because I agree with Scott that got brought up before about having information for myself as well to know what is mandated, what is essential. If we can have that conversation about what is essential, I know that's a hard conversation to have. We heard from teachers that coaching is essential, and then to some community members that might not be essential to them. But I think we need to really look at that rubric, which is a good way to put it. my teacher hat things used. So rubric and looking at it and say, you know, this is what's absolutely necessary. These are the things that are absolutely necessary by state mandate. I mean, we couldn't get rid of them even if we possibly wanted to. And then what's the cost associated with that? And then the other thing I wanted to just bring up, I understand the importance of talking about the areas and the cost. However, part of the conversation I'm hoping we're having tonight, us choosing the areas, I don't know if that will pass the budget. So we can choose areas, but I do want to have it in mind that when the community is here and they're saying that they don't have the information and there's a perception issue and they want more community involvement. I would love to have part of the conversation after we talk about areas to really talk about, well, what are the areas that they think? And I love the survey, that's great. I want to do more of that to make sure that whatever areas I'm choosing are reflective of who I'm trying to represent.
I would add on to the research, we also got, we have to have that author coach to help explain to them what these parts are and what they do. I still think there's a huge disconnect with a lot of folks. Like you said, we hear from our staff that these instructional sports are important. And you hear from the community, a lot of them don't get it. So they think it's fluff, it's fat, it's all these different things. And it's not, because our staff is saying it's important, it's vital to them. And I think there's still a huge disconnect with a lot of folks that don't understand a lot of folks in our district do, even when we try to help explain them. We gotta be a little more intense to that, more intentional. We have to add that piece there before we say, what do you want to do? We need to make sure they understand what the cards are before you say, okay, now what do you want to go ahead and try to do?
Yeah, and I do too. So that's why I'm hesitant to even like throw out an area, because I want to know the impact and I want to make sure that what I'm putting out there.
We touched upon transportation. One thing that I've seen some comments about is that some of the buses are not running at full capacity. So perhaps we should explore the carrier right-sizing the buses based on ridership. And that would be somewhat of a reduction that could be explored. But if we're sending out a 50-passenger bus and only 20 students ride, the cost is greater for that big bus than it would be for a smaller bus. So that's
yeah, and transportation's on the list as well.
I understand. I just wanted to put that out there as well so that it can be looked at. It's a
Back to your point about like getting that feedback from the community. Again, like tonight, we're trying to get as many options on the table as possible. But again, like that doesn't mean that we're saying necessarily the community wants every single one of those. But I think the more options we can get out there, then
Yeah,
like doing that
absolutely.
feedback. Absolutely.
Yeah, and so if you could do the options by those buckets, would be super helpful.
Yep.
I don't know if that helps you, Beth and Brian and Heather in your direction. Yep.
I would also say you're now going to be receiving plenty of input from and you will be hearing from many people, some are in this room, now much more often through your board email. So some of the views expressed tonight have been informed by reading emails from the public.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Thank you, Steph.
And also ultimately, votes and decisions are the thing that sit around this table. So as elected officials, it really is on us to be trying to engage with the community as much as possible. So that when we're sitting here, we are reflective of what we're hearing from the community too. So, you know, we will, obviously a big part of that is engaging, but ultimately we have to make those decisions at the table that we hopefully will be reflecting what the community wants.
Right.
So when we talk about, you know, making that decision and the budget that we're going to put forth, that's why we really want to shoot for the, you know, shoot for the budget. So,
I don't miss this, I'm sorry, when I stepped out. In regards to transportation, is there a way to look at, before merger, like who traditionally walked? You know what I mean? Like what would happen if we like.
We also have a transportation policy that the board wrote right after the merger.
Okay.
So that says that we will, but that would have to be adjusted, right? Board. You could rescind that policy and start again, but that just.
or change it, right? Or
And then before changing, we can at least look at costs
Yes,
and then
exactly.
determine
Yeah.
if we go through that process.
That board switched, that board at that time, that policy switched the lens from transportation in concentrated on the community it serves to transportation on the grade level it serves. So
Yes, okay, right, because
it
I'm
tried
trying
to-
to, right.
tried
And
to
I'm
switch
not
that.
saying we should, I'm just, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would need a little, we would need some assistance if the board wanted to model things that are outside of policy. If the board wanted to look at like, do we need to provide X transportation to this community that used to be pedestrian, or this to one that used to be, is really rural? Because that would be against, that would be asking us to create an operation that is against policy. So I just would need some help with that.
Would the school district be able to organize a carpool system?
I think the community, when we've been asked to participate in that, I've always said that I think that the community could do that in a much better way than the school district, because the school district would start entering in all kinds of things with risk management and like, I think we would honestly complicate it. And we also, we would build it for 185 days, opposed to building a community resource that could even operate and serve residents over the summer and school breaks and other times when you might need to get to places other than just school. That's a possibility.
I think transportation is so nuanced and there's just so much more that goes into it than when even we realize, you know, and so I think, you know, I hear that a lot. Like, oh, the buses, but it's just, it's so much more. than that.
Right, and we hear the buses aren't totally full.
Right.
Andre brought that up. We have an opt-in system.
Yes.
That you think that people will either opt in or opt out. They opt in just in case a parent is sick or guardian is sick, they have to jump on the bus. So we save that spot. That's really the hard part of transportation. Because you never know when they need it. And then you see a bus with 20 kids on it. And you think, oh,
And, you know,
I
we
follow
talked
one down
about
the road every day.
truancy and then how those numbers have gone down for, you know, I'm not saying ditch transportation of this, I'm trying to.
So, so I think in terms of process, like for time for administration, board and a community, let's just use transportation as an example. Next meeting, they'll come back with, hey, here's how much transportation costs, and kind of navigate through, all right, would this be a bucket that the community would tolerate? And then dig into it deeper of, okay, how much of transportation would take off? And not saying that we're specifically doing that, just using it as an example. So that'd be like the process, which is why we want to have multiple meetings. At this point, I would like to continue moving on unless there's other areas. Is everyone comfortable moving on at this point? Because what I want to get into is talking about our next meetings so that we can line these up. And I want to make sure that Brian and Val have enough time to then bring us information between these meetings. So my thought for the meeting on the 16th would be administrator brings back this list. We're basically having two parts of that meeting. One is to talk about all the different areas. And then two is to kind of narrow down and think through how much do we want to take off the overall budget. With Brian and Beth bringing, like they said, some of those different scenarios. Is that?
What about Monday?
So we could have a meeting Monday. It's just, I'm not sure.
Your board is participating in support staff negotiations on Monday.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
You might have something.
So what I was gonna say is if we have a meeting Tuesday and then another meeting on Thursday, that would give at least one full work day in between for administration to be able to bring more stuff back. And then we would want to also have community engagement within there. I think it's important. So I think Tuesday, I would say before Tuesday, having community engagement, we want to get all the details so we can show to the community, here's all these different areas. But we really want community engagement, again, to see would the potential be more, or also how do they feel about these different areas? So that we can get a pulse on that. Is that?
I want to,
Go ahead.
I'm talking about what you're saying, so.
Go ahead.
You want to communicate before we talk about those hard numbers on Tuesday, or do you want after we start to begin to get some numbers?
I think so that we can show numbers to the community to see how those different areas would impact.
So do you want to be communicating before the on Thursday then? I think we should like an hour communication, we talk about that, and we kind of go deeper into that.
What Thursday?
Next Thursday.
Next Thursday. So we'll have a meeting.
Oh, I see, you're proposing 16 and 18. All right, all right, I didn't hear the 18 yet. Okay.
Are you saying that 18 community engagement?
We would start with community engagement.
Yep, start, have an hour of community engagement at the beginning and then move into the business meeting where we start narrowing down some of these areas.
And I would think that instead of half hour, an hour, it's an hour probably.
Can we talk about what that community, and maybe now is not the time, maybe that's the 16th, but, or maybe that's too late. I don't know. What that community engagement can look like. A former board member that was, in my seat had a great idea of having a back and forth. And then also at a previous board meeting, one of the former Westford reps talked about having more of like an open dialogue where themes were found, kind of like you would do if you're doing focus groups and things, rather than just like the mingling, which I very much enjoyed. But, so I would love to have a conversation about how we actually construct it differently than last time.
I think Thursday would be a good time for that instead of Tuesday, because we won't really have any options yet.
That's what we're going.
No,
with.
but talking, the structure, how we talk about it. Maybe Tuesday we can talk about how to structure it, or I don't know if we have that conversation tonight.
Are we able to do it like a traditional like community engagement meeting, like the one that we have?
Yeah, so it's,
Spring or
yeah, because the
whatever?
community engagement would be one where it's a back and forth.
It was just a general one.
The one.
It was my first meeting, yeah.
Your first
It
meeting
was last year.
May, and that was
Yeah, in the
the- that was one.
Yeah.
Brian kind of left it kind of basic, and then we have like
I remember talking
questions.
about.
Yeah, I mean, we could do something like that there where we have a basic, kind of like some basics where information we got from Tuesday, we got like a quick overview, like a 5-minute overview, and then getting questions and then show answers, and then kind of go back and then capture information. How's that feel?
Yeah, it feels much better. Thank you.
The other thing, and again, we should do the work, is if we do in-person community engagement Thursday, my other recommendation would be Wednesday evening to do a virtual community engagement.
I would prefer, do we have,
The 17th?
we don't have a,
Okay.
we don't have negotiations that I do.
Right, but
Again,
again,
I know there's a lot of negotiations in my calendar right now, and I know we're.
no, not on the 17th. So,
Okay, then yeah,
so my recommendation is a piece of having 3 meetings next week. So Tuesday would be the information, we get all the information together that the community can see. Wednesday would be the virtual community engagement, because we had a really high turnout for the first budget that came to community engagement online. So we can get some good feedback through there. Also have an hour of community engagement at the beginning of the 17th meeting. And then, sorry, 18th, and then go into further conversation then at that meeting to dive down deeper.
And just so I'm getting it clear in my head, you all will bring back to us the buckets as well as this is a requirement, this is not a requirement, okay? Am I getting that right?
That's what I have on my list.
Beautiful.
And
Yeah.
for like scenarios of tax effect, right?
Yeah.
So it'd be
Yeah.
a bucket,
Scenarios.
Beautiful. And then secondly, with the community engagement, could we start communicating that ASAP?
Yes.
So that the community has plenty of time
That's
to
why I
prep
wanted
for
to
it.
lock it in tonight.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, yeah. And so that's the other part I was gonna mention, Thursday, so I know media factory, Thursday night, could we use the cafeteria for a larger space? Or,
Do you have facilities on your?
If not,
if not, yeah. I'm just sure the
Yes.
library is-
I love it.
yeah.
What are the dates you can't check? Thursday, 18th, April 18th. Thursday.
So while they're looking into that, on Wednesday for community engagement, virtually, I know our last session was an hour, given us we're at 90 minutes. Having an expanded time within there so that there's enough space for people to mention comments and we can take notes from. And then with that, obviously, like as we sign up these communications, also encouraging, hey, if you can attend, please email us. Again, with the budget the last time, for the community where I collected every single email, every single board member saw them, read them, had a full running spreadsheet with all of emails, comments, commentary, questions. Everything was in there that the board was able to read collectively one at a time. So we will do the same thing again.
Which also makes a request to add the link to the the budget page on there.
Yep.
Because we've gotten a lot of questions, a lot of comments, and a lot of ideas that are already addressed on the budget page.
Right.
Or what counterintuitive what the district has already explained on the budget page. I don't want to waste the community's time. I don't want to waste the board's time. If we have to keep answering questions that have already been answered, or the information is there for people to see it, then they will help the community also to be able to ask more targeted questions that can help us get more information and be able to craft a better budget.
Do we also want to consider offering more than 2 minutes? 3, maybe 2.5?
So the community engagement, there's no,
Okay.
yeah, so with that one, it's where they ask the question, we can go back and forth, but.
Okay.
When we get to the public comment of the meeting, we just traditionally done 2 in that section, so that we can get to the business of the meeting, but for the community engagement, we would ask them to keep within a reasonable amount of time so that we can get to as many questions.
It's not to have one person take 10 questions, or, you know what I mean? It's to be respectful of all the voices we have here.
Robert, and let me be clear, Robert did a really good job in the past of like having it out there so that people, asking a 2 or 3 questions, but it's starting on a monologue. So like, hey, so the people don't want to have a chance to talk to, can we circle back?
So the cafeteria is available on the 18th for the community engagement. The library for the board meeting is the best for media factory to set up and be there. So if you move, like you can stay there, but it's hard with sound in the cafeteria. Media factory.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll have the community engagement in the cafeteria, but then just come back to the library for the actual meeting.
We're going to recess with the and then restart the
cafeteria for 1 hour.
Actually, and something.
Oh,
So 90 minutes for the virtual.
Oh, for
Yeah.
now.
So, Tuesday night, start the meeting, we'll do, I guess, could we start the meeting at 6 rather than 6:30?
6 o'clock on the 16th.
Yeah. And do that for an hour to 7.
Yep.
And then on Wednesday, we would do an hour of community engagement.
On the
I'm sorry, no, Thursday.
Okay.
No, so, sorry, too many dates. Let me start over.
I saw I was there.
Tuesday, 6:30, no community engagement. Wednesday, community engagement for 90 minutes. I would say online starting at 6 p.m. Or do we want to start at 6:30?
I think 6:30 is a known time in a lot of ways, so.
So 6:30 to 8. Okay. Then Thursday, an hour of community engagement. That one, I think it is worth starting at 6 to 7, so that if we're starting our board meeting at 7, we then have time as a board to collectively discuss.
So the agenda for the board portion of that meeting on Thursday is to then have kind of heard everything from the public that Wednesday night online and the Thursday night prior to then discuss what the administration has shown us, what the community has told us, and we start, but we're not voting. We're not voting on the 18th.
No, because we would have to then give the final recommendation to them, then they have to bring us back a final proposed budget.
Okay, so we're talking about voting on that then the week of.
We got it.
So not during the,
We got the vacations.
we're not doing a vote during the week of vacation in this scenario.
We would
I think so, right?
Yeah,
So we meet 16, 17, and 18. And then we're meeting the following week
For vacation.
to pass or to vote on the budget as a board.
Because Brian, we need to be here by the 25th, correct?
So do we have any concerns of
Yeah,
attendance
to
from board
meet the
members?
I
deadline
could
that
do
you,
online, but I couldn't come in person.
So why?
so on Thursday, the 18th, you are going to provide us administration district guidance to the target you want to meet. And then 5 days later, you're going to be meeting as a board. You will review that budget and you will adopt it to bring to your voters.
I think that's what we're saying, because
Or
we're
we
waiting
time.
and then that
If you
gives
wanna
us,
meet the May 7th, we're
If
gonna
we-
have to-
Yeah.
I think so too, right? So I
So-
think
And that's fine. I just want to go back just for the sake of between Thursday and Tuesday. We have pretty high expectations when we think about delivering information to the board and the community. So these buckets and going through ed quality standards and all of that, we want to do a really good product. I don't think we have the time, we're not being afforded the time to do a really good product. So, you know, what we'll be doing in that case is to try to provide you data that will be important for you to then process, package, and explain to people in your various virtuals and other engagements. Because I think we're going to be hand delivering that information at the meeting, just with the amount of time that we have.
No, the onus is on us. We have to do the work. We have to go, we're going to have to do some of that work on our own. The only thing that's going to do a technical review, we have to do that overview ourselves. We can't expect you to like go to the full presentation and go, we can't do that work before you sit at the table. So it's got to be on us.
And I think that we're going to, yeah, it is being dictated by your interest in May 7th. And therefore you're just going to have a really have a window.
On May 7th, are we allowed to like be at the polling places or like discussions?
Yeah, so
Like
the
the
stands
same
outside of the polling place, but yeah, like, just like if someone was running for election, it can be outside the polling location and like, you can't approach people, but if people approach you.
Yeah.
So I guess the question then, to make sure that we can do this well, Brian, so I'm hearing correctly, with the process Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week, and given that we have to warn a budget by the 25th, we would give you the final guidance on next,
The 23rd.
well, on the 18th.
Oh, the final guidance.
Yeah, the final guidance. Does that then give enough time? Okay.
I'm just trying to lower expectations.
Yeah, no, I guess the main thing is.
I don't know if spell check works that quick, so.
Well, I guess the main thing is like, can we move up in our timeline at all to be able to get that to you quicker? Like,
I appreciate the engagement that you're prioritizing the process. I was anticipating guidance on the 16th Tuesday. Okay. You know, part of this is trying to, because we have our own internal constituents. I understand we absolutely have to gauge the community and the community cross over with some of our staff, but it's important that we try not to do too much of this to people without people, right?
Yeah.
So when we start to move our timeline down, then we start to get into the point of like, okay, we have Friday and Monday to talk internally, to do our planning based upon the board's guidance. And the feeling that people may feel like their voices weren't heard, that didn't have a chance is pretty high when we're trying to get things into a Friday or a Monday. But
so the question is, could we bump that? Because we have until the 25th, and the 25th is on Thursday.
The warning needs to be published, not signed. It needs to be published as far as I understand. We can confirm that.
Okay.
If it's just signed and posted in 3 places, that's great. That will give us a little bit more time. And I think the only thing that we need is just clear articulation that the board is prioritizing May 7th, that is truncating opportunities for collaboration and communication, but it's trying to prioritize that work through these virtual engagements and physical engagements.
Right.
If the board is out there with that, then I think that as we try to work and do our very best in the course of those, you know, in the course of a 7.5 hour day, 2 of them, so we got 15 hours to work with people. Those are the kind of things. And I think that it's reasonable because we have a budget failure and we're trying to do something.
I think also we could have the ability when we get to that Thursday, after having 2 community engagements, if we get back feedback that's still showing a lot of concern or maybe a lot of confusion, we can start that conversation on Thursday night. Do we want to move forward? That's again, we talked about from the beginning. We can aim for the 7th. If we come back and the community's just like, no, don't do it, or there's not enough there for us to really have a decision one way or another, we can have that conversation so we're not saying, go ahead, full stop and then change it. But I think we need to make the attempt and then make that call next Thursday.
And as fairness to you guys, we would have to make that call that Thursday night. Like I would, and on Tuesday, no, let's wait longer. Like
No.
we would decide on.
We owe the administration to give them a definitive answer one way or another Thursday.
Yeah.
And then it'd be under the board advisement to ask administration to ensure that May 21st has the same polling options to us, 7th does, that they will be.
I was gonna do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
to have the option.
And then I was gonna check to just make sure there were no other blackout dates and probably the
And the
biggest,
14th is a blackout. day.
yeah, if, yeah,
Or there any holidays, the 7th.
our biggest problem would be the availability of the expo, and we do have the ability by statute to relocate that whole place.
All right, so with that, we have our meetings. I will work with administration to get communications out ASAP. Please share them out with individuals you know as well. Community members, if you've heard the different information that's here tonight, thank you as a supporter for being here as well for the information. We will get it out everywhere that we are able to, along with the details, along with the link, as Marlon said, for the budget information.
We need to confirm that there are enough people for the 23rd.
Right, I think we should.
Because I'm not sure that I'm gonna be in the country.
So I'm thinking we're gonna have to be virtual for that regardless. That'll have to be a virtual meeting because there are some administration help as well. And multiple board members, so we wouldn't be able to meet more in person. But if we have a timeline, we decide on Thursday night that that's what we want to move forward with, we are gonna need to have that meeting. Yeah, great.
We'll need to be virtual next Tuesday. Is that right? It's gonna be virtual.
We've got that. Okay, we've got that. We are on technology. So with that, is there anything else? Community engagement wise, is there any other options? I mean, the other thing is if people wanna say, hey, I'm going to have coffee, come and grab, or sorry, have a coffee or mess or anything this weekend, feel free to connect with people, have lunch, get feedback, community members.
Yeah, we talked about like, maybe took us to get together coffee on Saturday, Sunday, let the community come out and ask questions and give feedback. Thoughts. As long as you're grateful.
Yep. All right, so we will get that information out, and then our next meeting, will be on Tuesday. At that one, we'll do a couple of the reorg pieces very quickly at the beginning to move through. And then we will get the agenda out as well for the next few meetings. Any other questions? Thank you all, and thank you to the community for being here as well. I appreciate you guys for taking out tonight. We'll be standing over time too, so thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. At this point in time, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn. So, and thank everyone. Have a good evening. See you on Tuesday.